Trump loses in 2020, he will not leave office, right? I think we have to begin to accept that and to think about how we stop that from happening, right? And sounds crazy, but this is a man who said, I'm not sure I'll accept the defeat if I lose, right? He's already said that. But also, there's a real reason for this. If in 2004, John Kerry had narrowly defeated George Bush instead of the other way around, or if in 2012 Mitt Romney had managed to defeat Barack Obama, what would George W. Bush have done? He would have started painting those bizarre paintings like puppies or something a few years earlier, and he'd gone to a few more Ranger games, right? What would Barack Obama have done? He'd go back to Chicago and he'd be, teaching at law school or something, right? What happens to Trump and the people around him? Most of them have the remainder of their life in legal trouble or in jail, and they are stripped of their wealth, right? That is the degree of the criminality. So they will not leave office unless we find a way legally, democratically, and peacefully to make them. And I'm going to spend some time talking about maybe how we do that. So what do we do here? And this made more sense in the PowerPoint, but maybe I'll skip this slide and go to the next one. So there are 4 things we need to do, and I'm going to keep track of them for you, okay? The first is, and these are really important. The first is, so this is the 4-point plan, right? The first point, support civil society, right? I have said civil society's finest moment. I stand by that. We continue to need our support. There are a lot of ways that we can do this, right? 1, give money if you have it, right? And here, there's a lot of different organizations to which you can give money, and there's part of the kind of progressive culture we've heard is give money to your local organization. Well, it depends what your local organization is. Your Black Improvement Association is not going to restore democracy, right? If there is a local organization that is advocating for immigrants in your community, providing them legal support, or helping them create media so that they can inform their community, yeah, that's a great place to give money. But the big organizations are doing good work, right? The ACLUs, the Planned Parenthoods, these type of organizations, they're doing good work. If you have money, keep giving it to them. I know we all know that, but it's worth saying. Second, defending media freedom is very important, right? And this is a harder thing to do, but it is, don't just read people like me who kibitz, right? Read real analysis, support that with your money, but also circulate those articles so that people know what real reporting is, and there's some very good real reporting going on right now. And I want to talk a little bit about the First Amendment here. All of us must continue to exercise our First Amendment rights every way we can. And I'm going to explain that in a minute, but let me give some examples. If you write for 10 people, if you send out, like my father does, he's not really on Twitter, but he sends out a rant, you could call it that, every month or so, to his children, older grandchildren, who are like my kids, brothers, well, only the ones who are on the critical, who share his views, and close friends, 10, 15 people. He does that every month, right? If you do that, if you send out a blog that gets 500 hits, if you stop doing that, people are going to think it's because you were afraid, right? So you can't stop, right? But it's more than that, right? Continue to go to the demonstrations. Continue to speak out. And the reason for that is that regimes like this one need a frightened population. If you are a semi-authoritarian regime and you want to stay in power, and that is the defining characteristic of these regimes, you need a frightened population. You don't want to take out guns and shoot people. This government does that, they're out of power, and bedlam will occur, right? They can't do that. They want us to be afraid, right? And now, we are in a big country, as some of you may know. So that includes, if you are in a smaller place, right? It's easy in Brooklyn, it's easy in Manhattan where I live, it's easy in San Francisco where I'm from. But if you look at that spreadsheet where 3 to 4 million or more people gathered on the Women's March in January, there was a spreadsheet that Professor University of Connecticut put together with all the places, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Boise, Idaho, this town in Montana. So that's where this matters. And those people are looking at us, right? So continue to exercise your First Amendment rights. They are under attack, and if we lose them, we're really a real problem. The second, so that's part one. Part two is an electoral component. And I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Larson, the social theorist, but he had a diagram. He had a cartoon called Far Side, I was making sure. But he had a diagram where he had like a whole bunch of complicated mathematical equations over here, and then a whole bunch of equally complicated mathematical equations over here, and then in the middle he wrote, then a miracle occurs, right? And the two scientists remember this. So we're trying to kind of figure out where that miracle is, right? So we have to work out the details of this. But we are not going to vote our way out of this, but we're not going to get out of this only by without voting, right? We have heard a lot from President Obama and other kind of liberal pundits and journalists saying we should all run for office. That's kind of silly, right? We're all going to go back to, I'm going to go primary Melissa Martin-Vitorino, like that's going to accomplish nothing, right? Most of us live in blue areas, and we shouldn't be primarying each other, and we shouldn't be running for office. That's nonsensical. However, if you have roots in a purple part of the country, or in a red state, that's something to think about. If you really want to do something, go back there and run, right? You don't have to win to help this cause, right? I can say that because I'm from San Francisco, so don't make me go back, I can't go back there either. So it's part of a broader effort, not a standalone goal. It's not about who to nominate in 2020, right? This is not, if we just get that kind of Al Franken, Kamala Harris, Christine Gillibrand, magic, whatever, formula, that's nonsense. But we need to think bigger than this, right? Because we may want to think about a national unity ticket. That's how you defeat non-democratic regimes, right? We may have to think beyond just what is the right democratic formula, right? Again, this will occur in the context of elections that are less free and fair. I'm trying to get the grammar right on that. I'll get back to that in a second. Now, much of this will occur on the subnational level, and there's a couple of reasons for this. And we don't see this as much living in blue states, but what happens in state legislatures are very important. That is where the rights are being taken away. The federal government is playing an important role in this case, the federal government we have now, in saying it's okay to take those rights away, but it's happening at the state levels, right? So a few legislative seats in state legislatures here and there will make a big difference. The other reason for this is that, I don't want to talk on the 2016 election, but 4 states, Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, we've all heard those 4 states. Now, when you lose a state by 20,000 votes in a big state, there's a million ways that you could have done something different, right? One of them is you pull more votes out of Detroit and Flint, places like that, Michigan. But another way is you look at all those districts where you essentially ran nobody for the state legislature. And if that person, somebody who runs a real campaign, doesn't win, gets 20%, they're going to bring in 500 votes for the Democrat. In that case, for Hillary Clinton. They're going to switch 200 from Trump to Clinton. So in these lower level races, particularly in purple states, but also in red states, that will generate a presence that will be very important. It also helps alleviate the fear, because there are people who are afraid to run on the Democratic ticket. And just like people are afraid to run on the Republican ticket in parts of the city, and here just because they'll lose and embarrass themselves. But if the fear is worse than that, you want to get people away from that. So that is something that people, if they're in that situation, can concretely do. 2018, I said it's going to be a tough year. Progress will be made, can be made. It may be made at the sub-national level. In other words, this is the state legislatures. And now here's something that's a little, I think is very important. When we think of a political campaign, particularly a field campaign, I'm sure many of you have volunteered or worked on campaigns in the past. You think of a field campaign in the United States as we're going to go, door to door in the neighborhood where there are swing voters and persuade them to vote for our party. Or we have a lot of voters for our party and persuade them to come out and then vote for our party. That's your typical field campaign in the United States. It's not what it is in most of the world, right? In most of the semi-authoritarian and even semi-democratic world, the field campaign is protecting the vote, right? More than it is pulling the vote out. It is protecting the vote. What does that mean? That means legal teams everywhere. Right now, I've done this actually here in New York in '93. Others maybe in more contested states. But what that means is that because of the voter suppression environment, remember, if you pass a law, let's just pick a state that might be important. I'm just picking one, Iowa. I just picked that. If you're in the state of Iowa and you pass a law that is relatively benign, right? And it just says that in order to vote, you have to, if you don't have a state-issued ID, you have to sign an affidavit that you are who you say you are, right? That's more harassment than we would like to solve a problem that is a complete fantasy, by the way, but it's not terrible, right? It's not saying you must have a U.S. passport or something. It doesn't matter how benign or malignant the law is, because people get scared, rumors get circulated, and people don't vote. And they get there and they say, oh, they're harassing him, I'm not going in. So then it becomes more work for those who are pushing, not for the Democratic Party, but for small d democracy. Because they want to make sure that people aren't scared of voting. That people, so on the one hand that they aren't scared, and secondly when they are challenged, they have legal support to back that up. What that means is that the effort has to be put in, a lot more effort. If the uphill battle is that much more uphill, that's the reality of the electoral component. So I've said 2, right? Now we're up to 3. Whenever I'm in the crowd listening, the audience listening, and someone says I'm going to get through 4, and I write 1 and I circle it, and then they'll say 2 and I've already gotten 6, so I'm trying to be very clear. This is point number 7. This is point number 3. Widespread demonstrations, spoken a little bit about this, not just in major cities and progressive places, but everywhere. These demonstrations give people confidence that they're not alone. This is how you help overcome fear. I was at a demonstration in Manhattan, and I think it was around tax day. But it may have been earlier. And there was a family of tourists from Michigan. And it was like 2 parents who were maybe 40-ish, and 2 children who were maybe 12 and 8. And they looked, it was not easy to look at them by what their politics were, but the man was a big dude. And they joined the demonstration, and he picked his son or his daughter up, put the kid on the shoulder so they could look around and see everybody, and then they took out their phone and started recording it, and the man was like, you should FaceTime your friends and tell them that you're here, right? This is important. Well, that's very empowering, right, for that family to see that, maybe in their town in Michigan, maybe they're not in the majority, right? So these widespread demonstrations, we now live in a world where the media, everything gets moved around so fast, they have a real impact. Whenever a politician says, we're not afraid of these demonstrations, what they mean is, I'm afraid of these demonstrations, right? If you ever read Robert Caro's momentous works on Lyndon Johnson, which you should read, they're really fantastic. In one of the books, he talks about, it's set in his later years of his presidency, and he's in his limo, and he's driving with, I believe it was Bill Moyer, but it might have been some other presidential aide. And the demonstrators, the Vietnam War are chanting, hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? You've all seen that information. And Johnson was going crazy. Now, Moyers or whoever reported the story to Caro, but there they are, they're singing that song again. It drove Johnson nuts. It got inside his head. Now, we know from the history books that Johnson went a little nuts towards the end, and Trump is starting out much. But it will get the attention of politicians. And we're already seeing this because of these accusations of paid demonstrators. Accusing the opposition of being paid demonstrators is what every authoritarian leader does before they flee to Moscow, right? So the more you hear about paid demonstrators, that means we are making progress and we're doing our work and we should continue to do more of it. Unfortunately, it's not going to be enough, right? At some point, we need to start thinking about general strikes, sit-ins, and other peaceful, legal, democratic actions. We know these work in the United States because they've worked in the past, right? This is not new, but we may have to go back to some of those. We should plan to go back to some. Now, these next 2 are extremely difficult, but I think absolutely essential. So when I prepared the first draft of this talk, it was right after the inauguration, and I was thinking of something for this summer, but maybe for next summer. I think we need a day of massive demonstrations. I think a day when you put 20 million Americans on the street, 1 out of every 16, woman, man, and child in the United States, that sends a pretty clear message, and that's doable. That's not 20 million people in Washington or in New York. It's, 500,000 here, 500,000 there, 250 here, added up. A show like that will inspire the people who are on the fence, scare the people who are on the wrong side, and empower the people who are fighting for democracy. It will also be a warm-up, be a dress rehearsal for the most important, which is the night the polls close in November of 2020. This is something we have seen all over the world when non-democratic regimes have been peacefully ousted in the 21st century, which is people must come to the streets, right? Everywhere. If you're in New York or Washington or San Francisco or LA, that's probably a demonstration, somewhere downtown in those areas. If you're in a smaller county, it's at the county seat where votes are being cast, or the town square, depending on what part of the country you're in. But that is how we will send a message that the outcome of this election must be honored. No mid-level election official is going to knowingly steal an election if they see this going on. And we know that because all over the world, people, those mid-level people, when they look around and see outside, they know which side they want to be on. Now, those of you who are particularly astute might say, don't we also have to win the election? Yes, we do. And I'm not going to get into what that magic formula is, but we do, and we have to win it with a small d democracy ticket. Maybe that's two Democrats, maybe it's a unity ticket, I don't know. I'm not in the business of coming up with names, because I think that's discussing the giant swing pennant, which if you're paying attention now is just a bizarre idea. But we have to be thinking of that as we approach 2030. So now we're on point 4, right? And this is the hardest, and I think the things that so far you probably agree with me, and now you're going to think I'm a little bit crazy, but those two don't include each other. And this is defections from the GOP. Now, I said before that the Republican Party has become the party of power, which is just there to be part of a powerful, non-democratic regime. That is true. It's not 100% true, right? We need to create an environment where people can leave that party and be part of the opposition, be part of the resistance, be part of the small d democratic movement. Now, it's not going to be John McCain and Lindsey Graham, right? We should just kind of repeat that over and over in your head. That's a fantasy, right? They have shown, John McCain has shown that he's all talk. Lindsey Graham has shown that he's pretty much all talk also. It may begin at a lower level, but it's a few people on the city council somewhere, a few people on the state legislature somewhere, right? Once they begin to break with Trump, there is a snowball effect, right? Now, here's the hard part. For that to work, it is essential that the democracy movement not be perceived as a left-wing one. And that's hard because many of us, including me, have essentially left-wing politics, right? There are many things that a Ted Cruz government would be doing had he won that would get me furious, get me on the streets, get me wanting to throw him out of office in 2020, but not get me petrified about the state of democracy. And in my view, that's what we have to address here. Yeah. So this movement has to be about democracy, not about left-wing politics. There has to be room for someone who disagrees with us on issues we hold dear, but also holds the First Amendment dear. Because this president doesn't, and this government doesn't. And if those things are threatened, we are in very bad shape. Now, on higher levels than mine, there needs to be dialogue with the Republican Party, right? You have to talk to these people. Don't just, don't scream at your Republican assembly person, particularly places outside New York, just because they voted for some Donald Trump type legislation at the state level, but talk about your real concerns. Leave that door open. That has to happen, and that's going to be very difficult. A couple last points here. So what kind of coalition is needed? The language that I always use is omnibus opposition is coalition, right? It is not an ideological one. We're not going to defeat this from the left. We're going to defeat this from the small d democracy. That is what we have seen all over the world. The advantage of having non-democratic, authoritarian regime being non-ideological is that they can pivot and fight any ideological movement, but they can't fight one that attacks them at the heart, which is a commitment to democracy, fighting against their commitment to limit democracy. It needs to be democracy, not issue-based. And this is hard to do because these issues get people crazy, right? So the withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, like that seemed, yes, we should be upset about that, right? The Affordable Health Care Act, if it were to become law, would be devastating for our country. But that's not how we're going to restore democracy. Some people will get motivated by that, but that can't be the whole story. It will need to be multi-partisan. And here I want to stress not just Democrat or Republican. And I'm going to get to that at the end, but all parties, right? There needs to be room for the 17 libertarians, right? The Greens, and yes, the Republicans. It has to be, otherwise it's not going to succeed. So, and it's to be diverse ideologically, right? There may not be Republican activists, but there are conservatives There are people who believe in small government and lower taxes who are horrified by Donald Trump and in the right environment would come out and speak. I mean, there are obvious examples. You've seen that Mueller comes to mind. But we need to be welcoming to people like that. I want to just close, because I know I've talked a long time, with I think 3 points that will, if you're not depressed already, move you in that direction. The first, this will take time. This may not happen in an electoral cycle. Like, these regimes take some time to run their course, to lose their steam. We have to be prepared for that. We can't throw up our hands if we don't win in 2020. Right? So be prepared. This could be a long fight. This next one is a difficult one. We should not assume that all Americans will be upset about or even recognize democratic rollback. Right? There are many people, all the people who live in China, who have kind of happy affluent life. China's dictatorship, right? There will be people here who simply will get tired of hearing it, don't want to hear it because it doesn't affect them personally, right? And in the United States, that we live in today, we are moving to a society. We've long had a society for a couple of decades where if you check these boxes, straight, white, and Christian, and I know that some people in this room, and I'm not, you're 70% of those people who check all three of those boxes are likely to vote for the Republican Party, right? Just a simple identity, boom, boom, boom. If you check 2 or fewer, it's anywhere from about 70 to 90 to vote for the other party, right? We are now moving towards a country where that is translating into tiers, TIE, of citizenship, right? If you present as white and Christian, right, and straight, different set of rules. You're a different American. I mean, and that means that many people who fit that description are going to say, well, it's not that bad. Well, it's not that bad because you're not Muslim, right? It's not that bad because you're not Mexican. It's not that bad because a swastika painted in your neighborhood doesn't really have the same impact as it does on other people, right? But that is a real problem. That's a real obstacle that we have to recognize. The last point is, I think that I see 3 scenarios here for where we could end up. And going from the most likely, the least likely to the most likely, they are as follows. The least likely is that we do vote ourselves out of this. And that somehow, between now and 2020, the Democratic Party picks up a few seats in 2018, that magic, Harris, Franken, Gillibrand, Garcetti, whatever ticket, wins in 2020, and we all go back to what passed for normal 2 or 3 years ago, which now seems ideal, right? But that's not likely. That's the least likely of my 3 scenarios. The second least likely is that the Bannonites win, and we move towards a decade or more of this kind of informal semi-authoritarianism, a country where the status of your citizenship has a great deal to do with how you worship, what you look like, and who you love. And I don't think any of us want to live in that country, right? And the third, and here's where I'm allowing myself to be a little optimistic, is that we win. But I want to just end by raising and posing the question of what does that look like? The experience of the last 2 years, I haven't mentioned Vladimir Putin's name much today, but regardless of whether you think it's fake news, as our president does, or you think at the end of the day it cost Hillary Clinton the election, or anything in between, the only reason it had effect is because our institutions were much weaker than we thought. Right? The reason that I say this needs to be a broad multi-party coalition is because the Democratic and Republican Party have failed. What is keeping them in place now are legal structures, right? There is no cohesive ideology for either of them. They are both kind of in these bizarre civil wars that have to do with everything and nothing, right? The undemocratic nature of our Constitution has been unambiguously revealed, right? Our Constitution is an undemocratic document. This is why the mores and conventions are so important, because if you throw those out, you don't have democracy in the United States. But we've seen, all the undemocratic nature of the Electoral College, which isn't based on one person, one vote, the similar betrayal of the notion of one person, one vote in the upper chamber of our national legislature, right? These are all problems that the world knows about now. we may have American democracy again. I believe we will. It's not going to look like the one that we've been used to for the last decades. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'm happy to take any questions. I don't know how you want to do it. Yes.
Do you want to
Pick people up.
throw it over? Or should people do that? Yeah, raise hands.
Raise
Okay.
hands.
You in the back, because you had your hand up first. Yes, you, the girl here. No, go ahead. Talk louder, please.
So I think this is something like a lot of us have been talking about in learning, and we really captured it. You know, this saying on the one hand, things like the ACA, there's kind of overall, like we're not to do with democratic goals. At the same time, not only do those issues really mobilize people, but you talked about how there's this group of people that's saying this doesn't affect me, right? So, I mean, and we are constantly going back and forth between kind of this perspective of like the threats to democracy and the wisdom of democracy, but it seems like the line is really blurry in so many ways, because if you want people to know how it affects them, you look at the process that the AHCA is going through right now. Like that's fundamentally undemocratic. You look at like the influence of the fossil fuel industry on politics, that's fundamentally undemocratic. So like I guess I'm questioning this distinction. To me, it seems all connected, especially from a perspective of like being an organizer and mobilizing people. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
There is a lot of gray area. I think it's how you started your comment, so I think that's right. I also want to be, this isn't a lecture on democratic theory, right? So when I say democracy, I mean the kind of bourgeois democracy of the late 20th and 21st century that we're accustomed to. I don't mean some abstract kind of real democracy. I mean democracy with all the flaws that we had. And there is gray area, right? But I also want to note that if everything is about democracy, then nothing is about democracy, right? So, the discussion, the kind of legislative hijinks that someone like Mitch McConnell has been engaging in for decades now, is that non-democratic? I think you'd have a real debate about that. But I think is calling the media enemies of the people threaten democracy? Yes. Now, obviously, all of these things threaten democracy, because is climate change, as the impact of climate change, not just in the U.S. but globally, is felt, it will weaken democratic institutions globally just because of the chaos it will create. So that is of course true. Now, the question of how I think the other important part of your question is how do you get people to care? That's really tough, right? And one of the ways you get people to care is you make these connections, so you figure out what issue is important to them. Climate change is a good one because that does move a different set of voters, a different set of people. But you kind of, what issues are important to them, but also this is why it takes time, right? I mean, this is the sad thing. These non-democratic regimes can survive for a while because until people begin to realize, wow, there's a real problem here. The advantage we have here is that we still have we come into this period of a democratic rollback with much stronger civil society, much freer media than most countries. So that's the advantage, and I think they're making a good effort to try to get people to care. I also think that there are a segment of voters for whom talking explicitly about democracy in non-ideological terms will move them more than talking about some of the issues that gun regulation or something like that, just some standard left-right issue in the kind of second decade of the 21st century. Yes, go.
Two questions. One is, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Mueller's investigation and kind of how you see that in the framework that you've laid out, because I think a lot of us are sort of hanging on this, investigation. What's going to happen? Is he going to fire Mueller? Is he going to fire Rosenstein? Are they going to find him guilty of something? I mean, and we don't know what's coming down the pipe. So maybe you could.
It's a perfect example of when you start asking yourself those questions. What do we say before we start asking those questions? We don't live in a democracy anymore.
Right.
So, a week or two ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump, a month ago, Mueller was appointed. I'm getting the dates wrong. You get the point.
Yeah. And
everyone this is a great appointment. Real professional guy, real solid guy. The Republicans are saying that. 2 weeks ago, Trump says, "I may fire him." And what is he doing? He's floating that idea, right? by the end of the week, the main student